Hi, welcome back to Art and Soul. My name is Mike Severin. I'm so glad you could join me today. We're going to be finishing up a painting. Hopefully we can get it finished tonight. And it's called Broken Buckets. And picture that I did here in the background, you'll see it. A bucket with some apples that have spilled out and a broken handle. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to the butterfly or not. We're going to see how much we can get done tonight, and what we don't finish, we may end up finishing next week, doing some fine detail work. But we're gonna get started. I am, like I said, really glad you joined me today because I am in a super mood. I have had some absolutely wonderful things happen this week, and I'm just pumped about life in general. So what we did last week, we had some technical difficulties last week, and a lot of the show, it looks like a lot of the greens are brown. But what we basically did is we started with just a light blue background with cerulean blue, and then we started bringing in some of these background colors of the weeds that would be in the background. So now we need to kind of do some intermediate, a little more detail. If you notice, these weeds are really faded and look like they're in the distance, kind of out of focus. So we want to bring in a little more of the middle ground right behind the bucket, and then we'll start in then on the bucket and on our apples. So to begin with, we're going to start in with those weeds, and I'll go through the colors really quickly that I'm working with tonight. I've got cad yellow here on the palette, our sap green, we've got a Prussian blue, a light cad red, and our burnt sienna, some alizarin crimson, and of course our white, our titanium white. So what we're going to do is start with, we're going to go right into our yellow. I'm going to grab some paint thinner, and we want to get this pretty fluid, and I just put in some sap green. I'm not doing any real mixing on the canvas here. I'm just kind of throwing the two together, and my brush, if you can see it, is just globbed full of color. And we're just going to be real free with this. And if you notice where I've got holding the brush, I'm way out here on the end of it. And we just want to just start bringing up some of these weeds. There's a little more detail to them than what the ones are in the background because they're closer to us. And we're just bringing some of that up. I'm just bringing in, if I could keep going down to the palette, or it's just because I'm just reloading my brush, but I'm doing real free, kind of making sure that we stay with, some big broad leaf strokes. And here in a little bit we'll get into the more real fine leaves that will be up front. This is a little lighter back here, so we want to darken that up. Remember, light only shows if you've got dark, so I want to get a little darker for those weeds in the background. Yeah, that's better. A little more fluid with the paint thinner. And as you're working at home, you've got a lot more time to, kind of fine tune that. I obviously have got to work pretty quickly here on the show. Otherwise, I don't get a whole lot done, and that's not good. So you can see I'm just kind of bringing up some of those weeds that are in the background there. Maybe a few across here, not a whole lot. Oh, it's pretty good for right now, I think. And then right along the base here, it's real dark and a lot of brown that's in there, like from the ground, and I want to maintain some of that. So I'm just going to grab a different brush here, a 1/2-inch brush, bristle brush, and we're going to go basically in the same colors that we're in, but we're just going to bring just some little, just going straight up, nothing real special, but we're maintaining again some of that brown that's there in the ground. It'll just show through a little bit. That's the reason why we do the underpainting, is so that we get our picture established, kind of where things are at, and then, but when we go back to start doing the finish work, we don't want to kill all of that base work, because that's what gives the painting the depth that we're looking for. You know, and you can use all sorts of different brushes. A lot of times I'll even use the big thick brush, a little 3-inch brush. That's a good start. We're going to leave that, and we're going to go now over onto our bucket. And the bucket, you know, I've made this into a wood bucket, but you know, you can do any kind of a bucket. You could do a little metal bucket if you wanted, or maybe you want to make it into a basket even. You could do that as well. It's your painting. Do it the way you would like. So last week we determined that our light source would be coming up here from the right, hitting down onto the bucket, onto the apples. So I want to take and just do a little lighter up here on the top. And so I'm just going to go in, get some of our titanium white, bring in some of our burnt sienna, and just a hair bit of the alizarin crimson, and that's pretty pinkish, but how we gray that down is we just bring in a little bit of that Prussian blue, and we'll just test it up here and see how it looks. See, it's still way too pink. So what do? We just bring in more of that Prussian blue into it, and a little more of the burnt sienna. You know, and again, this is something that you can do as much as you want to do, as detailed as you want to go. And you're going, man, that's kind of on the purplish hues. Well, it is, because down here at the bottom, it's going to be, and it's not, the sun's only casting right on the top there. So that's the reason why if you are out in nature and you start looking, that you will see lavenders and purples a lot in nature, in the shadows. And I'm going straight into that alizarin crimson down here on the bottom, and that's really bright alizarin crimson, which is fine. Like you've watched on the show before, I do a lot of blending on the canvas itself, and that's kind of my own personal way of doing it. You know, you may feel more comfortable doing it on the palette, and that's perfectly fine. Finding a balance that works for you is the most important thing. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking basically some of that color that's on my brush, and I'm just taking and separating out kind of maybe where those slats of that barrel might be coming from, or coming across the bucket. Looks pretty good like that. I really kind of like that. And of course, we'll have some of that shadow color that would be back in the back of that bucket because the sun wouldn't be hitting it. And we'll just lightly feather that out because we don't want to kill all of that underpainting that we put in there last week. It's looking pretty good. Now, the apples themselves, we'll get back to the bucket here in just a minute with some of the highlights that we're going to start incorporating in there to make it look more wood. But before I do that, I don't want to get caught up in getting too far ahead of myself, but I want to get these apples a little more developed, and then we'll just kind of work around. A lot of times I will work throughout the painting rather than one item on it, because what happens is you end up losing some of the continuity, I think, in the painting by getting caught up with doing just one item on it. So I haven't cleaned my brush, still the same dirty brush that I've been working with, but I'm going to go right into that cad red. Now, these apples can obviously be any kind of an apple that you want to, paint. There's all sorts of variations, Gravestines and Red Delicious, there are a whole bunch of different ones. And all I'm doing here is I'm just taking and hitting kind of the top portion, or where the sun might be hitting on those apples. And of course we don't want all these apples the same position. We want them to look like some of them are laid over and some are standing up and on their sides. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring in some of the greens into here in just a minute, into those apples to make them look, I don't even know what the name are. Maybe those are gravestines. I don't know. I'm not an apple expert. I'm not an expert at much of anything. So, and I don't claim to be. If you don't claim to be an expert, then nobody expects anything out of you. So as you can see, we've just kind of put in some of those reds, and the ones that are out here that are fully exposed, I've got those a little brighter than the ones that are back in the basket because, again, the light wouldn't be hitting those quite as strong. So now I'm going to bring in some of those greens that I had talked about. So we're going to go into still the same brush. Now I haven't cleaned it up, and I've just got some yellow and the green on my brush. And we're just going to take and just start hitting. That's not very good English, Mike. But just bringing in some of that green into those apples. And again, you know, this is your painting, and you can do this any way that you would like to do it. Everyone's got their own preference and how they like to do it, and the subject matter that they're wanting to paint. That's the fun about this process, is that there is no right or wrong. It's your creation, and you know, so just do it the way you want to. And if somebody else happens to like what you've done and appreciates it, you know, that's even better. But again, you're not doing it for anybody but yourself. And that's the most important thing. And if somebody else doesn't like it, that's their problem. You had fun painting it and made you smile, so that's the main objective here. And I don't think we're probably going to get a chance to get all of this finished up tonight, and we may end up doing the finish of this next week. And I'm just, you know, as you can see, I'm just moving around to the different apples, and I'm not covering up. If you noticed, I'm still leaving some of that alizarin crimson that we used last week for our base color. I'm still leaving that there. It's not like it's disappeared. It's just there as kind of give it more depth and definition. And if you noticed, as I started out here, I had more bright colors on the brush, and as I started moving over, they started to blend with the colors that were underneath of those reds and the yellows, and so it kind of faded off, and it's become quite dark back in the bucket itself, which is what we're trying to accomplish. So now we've done that, we'll come back and do some more highlighting on those. And I just wiped my brush off. I didn't put it in the paint thinner, just got the excess off, and I just am taking and just hitting just kind of the outline of where that sun would be hitting on those. You know, I talked about how I had such a good week. It started on Halloween, and those of you that have watched the show, I bring up religion quite often, and it's not that I'm not endorsing any religion, and I just have got some real strong beliefs, but I had some situations that were happening that I was praying about that really came to be on Saturday in a really amazing way. And you know, a lot of times in life we kind of get sidetracked with all of our kind of self-pity and what's going on in our own lives, and and we kind of go, well, how come God isn't doing anything in my life? And nothing good is happening, only bad is happening. But you know, there's perfect timing for everything, and I'm a firm believer that nothing happens by chance, and there's a perfect timing for everything. And that really, really happened for me over the weekend, and so it just started my week off really good. Something that I've been wanting and praying for since back in July kind of came into fruition. So that's exciting to see things happen in your life like that. So as I was doing that, I just grabbed some of our Prussian blue, and I just went and kind of darkened up maybe where those stems might be coming out of the apples. And I'm again going to go straight into that Prussian blue again. And a few of these I'm just going to put in just the indication of a stem that might be coming out. And not all of these would have stems. Maybe on yours you want to put in a leaf or something, maybe attached to one of these stems. And again, it's your painting, do it the way you want to. That's a good start there. I think we're just going to leave it like that. Now I want to take and come back and start doing some of our highlights that are on the top of the bucket and around the edge of it. And what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to grab some of my yellow ochre and use that kind of as some of our highlight color here. And wouldn't you know, the one tube that I grabbed out of my box there is almost empty, but we can get enough out to do this. There we go. So again, I haven't cleaned my brush at all. Still the same dirty brush, and I just have wiped it off. Now a lot of people don't like that, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. You can do it in any way you want. I like doing it because I think it brings in a lot of colors that are in other parts of the painting, and it brings a lot of continuity into it. So I'm just taking, and I've just got that yellow ochre with a little bit of the white, the titanium white, and I'm just hitting just the outside edges of this bucket. And I'll go across the top of it. That's a little whiter than what I really want. I want it a little more towards the tan side. But that's a good start there. We'll just bring in a little more of the yellow ochre, darken it up a little bit. Yeah, that's better. But we'll leave that outside edge like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring that out, and I'm kind of dry brushing. I'm just kind of lightly going over the surface, and I'm letting basically the tooth of the canvas pull off what it wants. If it needs a little stronger at certain places, I'll do that. And you can kind of vary the lines that are going across there that might indicate maybe a little more of an indication of a wood grain to it. And again, I'm working pretty quickly here just because of the time restraints that I have. When I'm working in the studio, I'll sit and work on an area for, half an hour, or might work on just this bucket alone for a half an hour. But unfortunately, we can't do that here. So I don't want these shows to be 4 or 5 weeks long. I try to do them where they're just 2 or 3 sessions so that you don't get bored with the painting. I'm just going to lightly, just really lightly touch it, just to bring in some indications of that wood that's on the inside of the bucket. And this is something that anybody can do this, and I am firm believer that you just need to pull out some paint and just start putting it on the surface, and I think you'll find that it's a lot of fun. And it really is something that I think anybody can do and can find enjoyment in. And that's looking pretty good. I want to take now really quickly, we're running out of time here, but I want to start bringing in some of the grasses that are here in front of the bucket and put in some of our shadow colors that are down here underneath of these apples that would be cast. And so before I start the grass, I'm going to grab my Prussian blue, a little bit of that alizarin crimson. I want a real kind of a deep lavender color for that. And yeah, I just take it, and this would be obviously these apples that are up front here this would all be in shadow. You know, I'm just doing this out of my head. You know, maybe you want to take and throw some apples out on the table just to look at and to work with, and you know, sometimes that's really a good way to do it. It kind of reminds you about different things, and a lot of times when you're doing it out of memory, you don't always get it accurate. So, you know, if that makes you feel more comfortable, and then by all means do that. So I've just kind of thrown in just some shadow color down there that might be cast from on the back side of those apples. And down here again underneath the bucket, a little darker down here as well. It's been really fun to see. I've been getting lots of emails here in the last few weeks from people that are watching the show, and it's really fun to see what they're creating and the comments that they have, and I would encourage you, you know, if you like what we're doing here, and you know, I inspire you, I'd like to hear from you and like to see what you're creating. So we've finished up with that shadow color a little bit. Now I'm going to start bringing in some of this greens that are on the front side here, and I grabbed the wrong brush out of the paint thinner. And I would suggest using odorless paint thinner. If you're painting in the house, your family will appreciate that much more than having the stink of paint thinner in the house. So I just loaded with the sap green and the yellows, and we're just going to bring in just some weeds that or grasses that might be up here in front of the bucket. A little more fluid, so I'm just grabbing in some paint thinner. And again, my brush is just full of paint. That drives a lot of people crazy too, but there's a lot of things I do that probably drive people crazy. Ask any woman I've ever known. I'm really good at that. So I've just done a little bit there, and I want to do a little more, but I want to bring in more of the sap green just to darken it up. We're going to bring in a few of those over here. Just a little bit more over the top of those yellows that we had brought in earlier in the show. As you can see, it's just a matter of building, and the more you do this, the more comfortable you'll be doing it. See, and this is really dark down here, which is fine, but I want some more lighter blades of grass that are coming in there. We're going to grab the script brush here. Probably we won't get to it today. We'll have to do this again next week to get the rest of this finished up. But with the script brush, we'll bring in some really fine strands of grass, and we're just bringing in just a little more of the light colors across where we've already established the dark, where the sun might be just hitting just the edge of those blades of grass. It's pretty good for now. We can do a whole lot more. And of course, if you're working at home, you know, you've got the time to do that, and I would encourage you to do that. So between now and next show, what I'd like you to do, if you're painting along with me, get these apples kind of, they don't have the final highlights on them, but just get them where those intermediate tones are there. Develop this grass that's here in the background a little more, and make sure you get this up front of the bucket in good shape. And then next week what we'll do is we'll take and put in the handle and finish up with our grass highlights with the big script brush, and who knows, we might even be able to get a little butterfly in there as well. But as usual, we're out of time. I'd like to leave you with this, as I always do. This morning I was talking with an artist up in Portland, Jean Marie, and she is just an incredible portrait artist, and hopefully here shortly we'll be able to get her onto the show. Just really fun to watch her paint. But she's got a big show this weekend over at Cannon Beach, and so I was talking to her about that, and the very first question she asked is, how's the show going? How's the stuff that's happening with it? And I thought, why are you asking me about that? I would be going nuts if I had a show this weekend. And she's been sick all week, and all sorts of things happening with her aunt just almost right on the verge of death, and another friend that's got cancer that's fighting really a hard struggle there. But Jean had to ask me how I was doing and what was going on with me. And I was touched by that to begin with, just how sensitive that she was, which I think a lot of times we have a tendency to get so caught up in our own worlds that we're not sensitive to what's happening around us. But she made the comment about, you know, how bad shape that her aunt was in, and that the timing of this show was bad. And I said I had to remind her that God has a perfect timing for every single thing in your life. It may not seem ideal to you at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, He's got a plan. Everything has a time. And I know that you need to be reminded of that. I need to be reminded of that all the time. That we look at things again through that little straw through life, and we only see just a little fragment of it. We need to step back, take a look at the bigger picture. And be inspired this week. Do some painting, pottery, jewelry making. Go out, clip the rose bushes, whatever you need to do to be creative. But make sure you do something creative this week. And I look forward to seeing you next week here on Art and Soul. I appreciate you joining me. CJ, I love you.